that cross-party member steering group should be set up as soon as possible in July, and then we can take the work forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Leanne?
Yeah, I would actually agree with Helen's recommendation, and I would also like to add, I think in this time we can also set up a youth consultation as well, and perhaps give so a leadership statement from the council about the climate emergency strategy. But definitely I think we need to consult with young people in the next couple of months, so I'd like that included. Okay.
All right, so Everton can correct me if I get this wrong. So basically, we've got a recommendation. Well, the alternative recommendation which is being proposed is that we have the return of this note in relation to the consultation. Secondly, we have some sort of rough timetable for the establishment of the cross-party working group, and then thirdly, the aspect of the youth consultation that Leanne's just raised. Okay, so
sorry, Chair?
Sorry?
Can I ask that you deal with the first proposal submitted by Councillor Al Samurai first, please?
Yes, okay. All right, so I'll have to go through this formally then, one by one. So,
Ian, does it help if I withdraw the proposal, given the vote's clear, but to say that the kind of compromise option I support, in that if we get a formal report back to OSC urgently within the next week about additional consultation, then we'd be happy with that.
I think that would be helpful. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So just to be really clear, though, it's a formal report back to OSC with additional consultation within 1 week.
That's our option C then.
I've also got one other recommendation I'd like to suggest.
Sorry, Chair, if I may say, we haven't got a scheduled OSC meeting until the 2nd of June. So exactly. Are you referring to a special meeting, Councillor Al Samurai?
I won't do that to everyone by the 2nd of June.
I don't think so. No. Well, I think the thing is we from what I understand, the recommendation that was moved is not to refer it back, but is to refer to these 3 points, which the cabinet member would respond to. That's correct, isn't it? That's my understanding of what was moved.
Yeah.
Isn't that right, Helen and Gavin? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just keen to get timescale in that.
Well, we've asked for a timescale for the cross-party working group. I think you indicated hopefully within the next fortnight, and I'm sure Richard will take that away. But obviously, he has to, as he said before, he has to consult with the whips and establish the membership, etc. So can we agree it on that basis then, please?
I've got one other suggestion of a recommendation, Ian.
Okay, go on then.
Just that I am really concerned that after 12 months there still isn't a draft strategy, and I would like a recommendation noting OSC's concern about that and saying that we would like to see the draft strategy urgently. I mean,
well, I don't think Richard said that. I think he said it was work in progress.
There doesn't currently exist a draft that we can see as a committee. And I think we should express concern about that. We can have a vote on it. You can disagree with me, Ian, but I'm putting forward a recommendation that we should express concern as a committee that this council declared a climate change emergency over 12 months ago, and there isn't a draft strategy to show to OSC members today.
Well, I think the point that Richard was trying to say is that it is not complete. And there's no point producing an incomplete strategy. And we know that the conference was arranged and all sorts of other events were arranged, and they all had to go by the board because of COVID-19. Richard, do you want to make any further comment, Richard?
No, I think that's right, Chair. As you say, we'd like to have been further ahead if we hadn't had the lockdown. The lockdown has has made things harder for us, but we're still ensuring that we will have that strategy in place by July. So we're working to the time frame that was set out.
Fine. Okay.
I would like a
So,
vote, Chair, on my recommendation that this committee expresses concern that 12 months following the declaration of a climate change emergency 12 months ago, there is still no draft climate change strategy to show to this committee, and that should be shown to the committee as soon as it exists.
Okay. We'll go for a vote. I presume
Thank you.
You, Jane, and Humera are in favour of that. Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed. Because draft doesn't mean a final copy; it means a draft.
Oh, I'm not asking for an explanation. I'm just asking for a vote. So, with the Labour members, are any Labour members supporting this recommendation, this fourth recommendation?
To simply note concern that there isn't a draft after 12 months. I'm concerned that nobody else is concerned.
I'm in the middle of a vote, please.
Okay.
Are there any Labour members supporting that? No. So I presume all Labour members are voting against. Is that correct?
Yes.
Unconcerned.
Yes.
Yes, Chair.
Fine. Okay. Thank you. So no, that doesn't get carried. So we've got the three previous ones that we've agreed. And
Sorry,
that
Chair.
will forward.
If I could be a pain, would you just clarify what those recommendations you're putting forward are? I'm really sorry. I've got a little
It's
bit.
okay. It's okay. No, that's no problem. Helen, do you just want to clarify the point you made, the one point you made, Helen, please?
Oh, okay. So a recommendation following this meeting that the cabinet member produce a note for to come back to overview and scrutiny, outlining additional consultation and that can be carried out between now and July.
That's right. Thank you. Alice, the point that you made?
To request that the cabinet member to provide a clear timetable on when the cross-party working group will be set out, and I think we'd like that note within the next 10 days.
Thank you. And Leanne was the third one, please.
Yeah, so to make sure that we're engaging with young people during the consultation, so to set up a youth council to engage with young people, and also if possible to have a leadership statement from the council about the climate emergency issue. But I don't know whether this fits into this specific call, so.
No. I'm sure Richard will take that on
Chair.
board. Don't worry.
Okay.
Chair, sorry, just sorry, Victoria, after you.
Chair, can I just add
Yes.
something? Because
Yes,
I
sure.
added to the chat. Following on from Leanne's comment, I just want to make sure that in the consultation there's reflection on so-called hard-to-reach groups, the BAME community, young and obviously older as well, because sometimes the environmental issues, they tend to be left out of the process and classed as hard to reach. And I think it's important that, because we've got a high percentage of BAME within the borough, that they're reflected in the consultation as well. I don't know whether they go through faith groups, but also making a concerted effort to try and reach that community, those communities.
Fine. Well, I think we'd all be in agreement with that because the point was raised in the previous discussion as well.
So, sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Helen's first point, she said until July. Actually, we wanted that sooner. We wanted that in the paper in the next couple of weeks, I think. So not July for the consultation piece for how we're going to.
Yes, we agreed. 2nd of June, didn't we? Is what we agreed.
Yes, sorry. July was about the consultation, the additional consultation that could take place before the draft strategy is presented to Cabinet in July. It wasn't a deadline for the paper coming back to OSC.
Correct. Okay. Thank you. Right. So you clear on that, Everton?
One last point of clarification: the engagement with young people, is that information on how that will work?
Leanne?
Or are you asking for?
It's an action, so we're going to so it's an action in terms of consultation, so engaging with young people during the next 2 months, so during June and July. So before the strategy is produced, we need to consult with young people.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Okay then. So we've agreed all that. Fine. Thank you. And thank you, Richard, for coming along.
Thank you, Chair.
Cheers. Okay, let's move on. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just vary the order of the agenda slightly and bring up item 9, which is the council response to the pandemic. And you should have all had a copy of the recommendations that we've received collectively off everybody. I don't really want to go through these one by one. I only want, and we take it as read, what people, the reasons why people have put this forward. I just really want to listen if anybody has any questions on them or mightn't agree with them. I don't know, but I'd rather deal with that if I may. Otherwise, we could be here, as I say, till midnight. I don't really want that. Unless there's any violent disagreement against any of these particular recommendations.
Ian, I've just got one question,
sure.
if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, fine.
Sorry, just because I'm on my council iPad, I can't currently read the recommendations. I think there's one which I think Victoria put forward, which was about testing in social care, which was a good recommendation. But I just wanted to know what the most recent wording is that you've got there, so that I think it might need a tweak. You can come back to me if you want to, and I can find it on my other tablet. Would that be easier?
No, hold on. I'm just trying to. Oh yeah, here we are. About testing, you say?
Yeah, yeah. In social care.
Oh yes, here we are. Calls on the cabinet to carry out weekly testing of all care staff and residents in Southwark care homes.
So my only suggested tweak on that is because councils themselves are not either responsible for or able to carry out the testing, which is what that wording implies, is simply to say that the council takes proactive steps to coordinate testing. So that would be the only tweak that I would suggest to the committee. Otherwise, we'll be making a recommendation that the cabinet wouldn't be able to fulfil.
Yes. No, I understand. I appreciate that.
Okay?
That's okay with me. Is that okay with you, Victoria?
That's fine. That's fine.
Thanks.
Good.
Victoria.
Okay. Anybody else? Any disagreements?
It's Alice. I think there's just a couple where maybe they could be combined, and then I did just have a question for the Liberal Democrats in terms of recommendation.
Okay. Yeah. Far away.
7. Just the holiday from paying rent in the current financial year. I think we obviously all want everybody who's suffering hardship to be supported in the right way. I just want to be clear that we've kind of assessed the financial implications of that, or the Liberal Democrats have. It's just difficult without the cabinet member here. So that was just one I wanted to clarify. And then just in terms of just merging some, I suppose maybe it's not a job to do now, but I think there was a couple of recommendations about reviewing the impact on certain groups in some of the recommendations that I put in particular. And then there's a recommendation 15 which I agree on, and OSC should hold a dedicated session on the impact of COVID, and we just might combine those, and it would be good just to get Liberal Democrat colleagues' views on setting up the kind of review as opposed to an OSC meeting. So that was just a combined one. And I just wanted to clarify on the overall response and process. Sorry, so there's 3 points. Recommendation number 2. I didn't quite. Councillors hold a great deal of knowledge about their wards, but in this event, this has not been leveraged with several examples of duplication. I don't know if that holds true for all of us, so I just wanted to clarify that. I think it has been leveraged in some cases, so just wanted to kind of get a bit of feedback on that recommendation as well.
I can come back on 2 and 15. 15, absolutely fine, merge it. You're saying calls on cabinet. We're saying there just needs to be a review. However there needs to be a review, it does need to be independent of wherever. So I'm easy either way. In terms of point 2, I'm sorry, but it has been really inconsistent. So as councillors, there's quite a number of councillors who haven't been sort of involved in the process, and Peter John's response was to try and second guess what I might be saying when I asked him the questions, which was, it's all about your ego and you want to be involved and you have to defer to officers. And that is absolutely not what the case is here. But we've seen that the communities team, we've seen that Communities Southwark and others have been sending out surveys to try and find out information, which quite frankly, councillors generally have. And we haven't been involved in that. In the Civil Resilience Guide, it also, and I don't care if it's just a guide, has got some very clear recommendations for both the executive and for ward councillors. But because ward councillors weren't really sort of involved and we were communicated very late in the day, and even then not in a very clear way, we haven't been involved. I think the crux of this is there's a business continuity plan that the council holds. They need to make sure that all roles in the council are accounted for, and that includes 63 councillors, or at least 53 if you're going to minus the cabinet from there. You can word it differently if you want to. Rant over.
Definition, then we don't know what it's
Alice, did you want to come back at all on that point?
Sorry, can I just let me look at it, see if there's a potential other wording. I think I agree with the sentiment of leveraging everybody's expertise. I just wonder if there's a slightly different framing. So if
I'm sure you can write, you can do it in a much nicer way, Alice. You go for it.
Chair, I know if you've got a list of people, but I'd like to join the list just to come back in with another comment on number 6, if that's okay.
Yeah, far away.
Should I do it now? It's the cost of that, which I think is a point that's already been raised, is a serious concern. And if we're going to make a recommendation, we need to be more confident around that. And it refers to people on low incomes. What definition of low income is being used in that recommendation as well? I mean, that we're talking about serious money if we're making that recommendation. And I don't feel like I've got enough information about that in order to make that recommendation. So that's number 6 that's on the paper.
Is it 6 or 7?
6.
6, right, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
The same principle applies to 7. I think it's just under 7.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think Anoud can respond to that, but she's kind of struggling a bit with her iPad at the minute. And I'm just sending her a picture of the questions because I think just like you, Gavin, you're kind of trying to see that. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going
Yeah,
back.
I can.
I've just
sorry,
WhatsApped it to you.
Thanks. I did on the chat say I could try and answer Alice's point, which was the rent holiday one as well. But let me just check I've got the right point. Yeah, so 6 is about council tax reduction and 7 was about rent holiday. And it was basically the affordability of it, wasn't it? I mean, if I can understand members' concerns, and I think if people would be more comfortable with wording saying the council needs to look at this. I mean, on the rent holiday, it's more of a cash flow than anything else, I suppose, because the idea was obviously people who own properties have been offered mortgage holidays. It doesn't mean they don't pay them, they still end up paying the same amount of mortgage, that they just delay the payments. So it would be the same principle with rent holidays, that it's not that people get 3 months off paying rent. It's just that they get given some breathing space and then they get given a long period to make the repayments for the gap that they've had. It just seemed a kind of way of being fair to people who are tenants as well as people who are homeowners, and recognising that, if people have lost jobs and things, it just takes a bit of time. So I do think that one's affordable and doesn't need sort of further research. I think, Gavin, you're right. So there is a definition of low incomes, which we know many other councils offer exemption, 100% exemption to council tax. We currently, as Southwark, offer 85% discounts to people on low incomes. So it's effectively increasing that discount from 85% to 100%. Obviously, it would be, particularly based on people who need that, but it just seems something that we know councils can offer. We know other councils do it, and actually, we're trying to help our residents however we can, and council tax is a clear lever that the council has. So I'd be really keen that we kept that in, but if people are nervous, then I think we could ask the council to explore it rather than to definitely do it.
I think for Chair, if I can, is that all right?
Sorry again.
Chair.
Yes, Gavin.
Yeah, thanks. I think for both of them, simply because we don't have the information that we need, I think they're fair points that you're making. I would be more comfortable if we ask the cabinet to look at both of those things, as you suggest, Anoud, as a compromise. if it's firmer than that, then I think we as local politicians are committing ourselves to a kind of a spending commitment, if you like, without the information that we need in order to make that.
Gavin, is the wording the cabinet should consider extending, and then consider is their way of looking at? What's the word that would work for you?
Or explore.
They should investigate, I think.
Can I contribute? I think the wording, the possible wording that might be helpful is once the council have been in receipt of information from central government about what support financially they'll be given to us, then we should therefore assess what we're able to do, and then we can follow on. I think the information from government is essential here. So once we've received,
I don't think that applies to the rent holiday one. And actually, as I say, other councils can do 100% on council tax. I think that the problem is this is about urgent support for residents now, isn't it? So, if you kick it too much into the long grass, then frankly, they need the rent holidays now, not once we hear from government.
Okay. I think the thing is, we're calling on the cabinet to investigate it. That's as much as we can do. We can't decide, we can't make policy, but all we can do is advise and point the cabinet in the direction that we would like them to investigate. And I think with all this section really on housing and homelessness, the bulk of it really is that's what we're asking the council to do, the cabinet to do, is to investigate. I think if we can approach it in that spirit, I think we could get agreement on it.
Sorry, Chair, I'm very happy with that, and I think it's investigate and I suppose respond back to OSC, which I know they would do on all these recommendations anyway. But I think as Gavin's saying, we want to know that information about whether it can work financially, because if it can, then that's a good thing to do.
Sure.
So for 6 and 7, I'll reword that and I'll just resend that paper back to yourself and Everton, Ian, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
And then Alice might have a go at rewording number 2, or do you want me to be a bit more diplomatic?
You can't see me.
Can you be more diplomatic? I don't know.
What, short of calling someone an arse?
Yeah. I think there's some of the duplication I think that was referred to as well by Alice that needs to, but perhaps Everton can have a look at that as well. Alice, did you come up with a formal word?
Sorry. Well, I think on 2, I think the first sentence is totally fine. I just say councillors hold a great deal of knowledge about their wards, and the council must ensure this is leveraged to avoid duplication and maximise knowledge. Is that okay? And then the rest stays the same.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, we can live with that. Jolly good.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that anything else? Happy with everything else?
Can I just ask, sorry, on overall response and process, number 4, a cross-party working group should be established. I definitely agree with that. I just wanted to understand are you suggesting now or
now? Because the medium and long-term implications are hitting month in, month out. So if we leave it till later, we will have missed this middle chunk. So we really need a cross-party working group now.
Okay. Should we just put in should be established as soon as possible? Because I agree with that.
Who's sighing heavily there?
I just want to clarify one point, which is obviously I think Jason made an important point about finance and government finance. The cabinet report and the main report obviously already has a recommendation on that. So I just wanted to clarify that we're supporting all those recommendations rather than it looking like we don't think that we need to reaffirm those. It was just a process point, I guess, that we're not duplicating any of those recommendations, but we do obviously want to support all of those as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the decision's been taken by the cabinet. I mean, these are our recommendations coming out of the discussions that we had last week with the relevant cabinet members and other people. So, I mean, these recommendations stand by themselves and will go to the cabinet for their deliberation.
Okay.
Okay. So so we can send them. I'll get Everton to redraft everything, send it round to everybody by email, and then if you all confirm everything's happy, then we can send it off. Is that okay? Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Great, good. We can move on to item 7 now. It's an update from the individual commission chairs. Oh dear. So let's have a look now. Who have we got? Gavin, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. Just one sec, Chair.
It's all right.
Sort my papers out.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
So just in terms of you've got the written update. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to take a look. And presumably what you want, Chair, just to check, is you want me to just give a quick verbal update on the Commission's work and where we go from here. Is that right?
Yeah. Just to give a synopsis of the issues you've touched, where you are on them, and where we go from here. Absolutely right.
Good. Okay. So the good bit of news about the repairs report is that report was completed. It was unanimously agreed by the committee. Had a series of kind of big ticket recommendations on it, including dismantling the light client model around repairs, making sure that residents have a role in verifying the completion of a repair, reallocating resources from other activities into resolving long-term incomplete repairs, and also making sure that people who are answering calls at the call centre on repairs are specialists and understand the technicalities of the repairs service. So that was completed. It directly influenced the subsequent cabinet report on repairs and helped to shape that directly, including those big ticket items that I've just mentioned as well. So I think it's a good example of scrutiny doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which is shaping policy in a way that's constructive but makes a big difference as well. We've had lots of sessions in the Housing Scrutiny Commission on a wide variety of different issues. The ones that kind of stick out, they're all in the written report, but the one on new homes was really interesting. It will be fascinating once the pandemic crisis is resolved or over to some extent, and we're able to return, or in fact before then, even if we're doing it digitally, to have another session on new homes. I think the impact of the crisis and how that moves forward will be very interesting. So doing that again. We have done a lot of evidence gathering around the district heating scrutiny. We were due to have an additional session on the Aylesbury, a follow-up session. So we need to have that before we can start the drafting of the report, but that's well advanced. So I'm fine with where that is. We had a new one for me. In scrutiny, we brought in an external organisation. Actually, the Housing Scrutiny Commission was almost acting as a kind of honest broker in a series of really serious issues that had arisen in Newington Ward in Clarson House with regard to Wandle Housing Association. And we had an excellent session there, which involved a lot of very frank exchanges of views from both Wandle and the residents of Clarson House. And I think we're making significant progress there, and we're going to have a follow-up session on that as well to follow up on the things that Wandle agreed to do. We've also done temporary accommodation and void sessions as well as kind of lighter touch scrutiny, I guess, in having individual sessions on those, which have gone really, really well. The various members of the committee have done a brilliant job in contributing to all of that work that I've just laid out, including the repairs report. But if people have got any questions, happy to answer them, Chair. Hope that gives an overview.
That's excellent, Gavin. Thank you very much. Yes, they're all lining up to question you. You'll be glad to hear.
Great.
Yeah. And new to kick off.
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, Gavin, housing, as we all know, is the kind of biggest thing in our postbags and all the rest of it. How have you actually decided what you've done and what's on the agenda? And is it possible to kind of increase your consultation about how you actually decide what scrutiny looks like, given there's always limited time and it's a portfolio where there's more issues than most?
Sorry, I'm just no, I'm not on mute. So the members of the committee have had the most direct input into what we look at. Obviously, they have consulted themselves with colleagues in their groups So, you know, we had a, you know, open and honest discussion about the work programme at the start of the year. And I think we've kind of followed through on that. So that's been the main way of doing it. Obviously, all of us have got our own way of kind of picking up issues. You know, that would have come through things like casework. It would have come through us, you know, knocking on doors and talking to people as well in the local community. So I suppose it's as councillors doing our role properly, keeping our eyes and ears open, picking up those issues and then bringing it to the work programme. And obviously, that's not just myself, that's all the members of the Housing Scrutiny Commission. So I think we've been open to all new ideas, and that's how we ended up constructing that particular work programme.
Great,
okay.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you. I will certainly feed back to our members if they've got anything. They should feed it in to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, there's no other questions. You'll be glad to hear. So,
no, I had one.
Yeah.
Who's this?
Alice.
Alice, okay.
Thanks. I just wanted to welcome particularly the kind of work you've done in Newington on Clarston House. I just related to that, I guess, it's just to understand how we are kind of keeping track and building a record. So because obviously, and I think we're going to see a lot of this from COVID, different responses from different housing providers. So just in terms of like, how are you as a kind of commission making sure we're kind of keeping track of different housing providers and what's happening, so that we're like building an evidence base for the future? Would just be good to get any reflections on that.
Yeah. So with any scrutiny work that we do in the Housing Scrutiny Commission, I've always been aware of this. I always want to make sure there's a record of actions both for us and for other people that come and talk to us and make promises. So, for example, with Clarston House, you'll recall they made a series of very specific promises about actions that they would be following up on. We've got a record of those, and now we're going to have a follow-up session later in order to follow up on all of those things as well. The same goes for all the sessions we've had on voids, on temporary accommodation, on new homes, and we'll check back in. I think seeing scrutiny as an ongoing process, not just as a kind of something you do once and then forget about it, is really important. Sometimes that is done in the form of writing a formal written report, which is what we're doing on district heating and repairs. Other times it's just about making sure that you're communicating with the people who are kind of the key decision makers. That might be a developer, or it might be, you know, the cabinet member who's responsible for that particular area.
Great, thank you. Can I move on now? And Victoria, please, can you just give a quick overview?
Hi, a quick overview. From when I wrote this update, obviously this is before the pandemic, the outline in terms of our focus on care homes, because initially we thought if we start with health and adult social care, it's just so many different areas. So decided to focus on care homes and then focus on obviously mental health, and obviously some key communities are not focused on, which is the BME community and young men. In terms of the care home thing, this is obviously my update was written before COVID. So what I'm going to add, I'm going to split it, because the actual report that will come out in the next couple of months will actually be slightly different, because there's going to be a whole section on how we supported our staff and service users in the care homes with PPE, with the COVID crisis and whatever. Has that had an impact on the service delivery and whatever? But I'm going to split it. The second part of that will be focusing on elderly people with disabilities, either learning disabilities or physical disabilities, because when we tend to think of people in care, extra care, nursing home, we tend to forget people with additional disabilities. So I want to put that as part 2, but also in my response and questions to council officers and Jeanette's teams and Jasmine's teams, focusing on what about the 70% of our residents who receive out of borough provision. I think it's really important to sort of check back. What are we doing? Are they getting the support? But also future-proofing our 2 new nursing provision in Tower Bridge and the other one, because also, I mean, there's been a focus, as you will see on my update, on the lay inspection project. The reason why I was doing that, and we got feedback from the lay inspectors and Age UK, etc., is that is the only project which actually we talk to service users and their families and say, you know, how could we improve the programme? How you know, rather than just the usual contract monitoring, this is an informal way of finding out from service users' families, how are we delivering? Let's not be complacent, but if there's any issues, how can we resolve that as a council, but also future-proof it into future deliverers, whoever they may be in the 2 new projects. And I think we've had interesting feedback from local residents who've had, how can I put it, not a very good experience of one of our providers. and she had to move her husband out of one of the provision. Yes, it may be a one-off, but however, we haven't got a sense of, in terms of complaints, how many complaints have we got? For me, you know, complaints, we can learn from that and we can actually feed that back in and improve our provision, because I don't think any borough does social care, you know, 100%, and you're never going to get the 100%. And given in light of COVID-19, we have to, even though we've only got 7-8 care providers, care homes in our borough, we still need to make sure that those providers are delivering an excellent job. So I think in my update, in my eventual report, it will be slightly different, because it will focus on obviously the COVID response, but also it will focus on how we're providing, how we're supporting our residents out of borough, but also how are we dealing with issues within our care homes, and also future-proofing that into the 2 new services, because what we don't want to do is make mistakes of what we made before. And then obviously in the mental health report, that's going to be slightly different, because before COVID, we were going to have visits to Lambeth, Black Thrive and other organisations like that who actually focus on the BME community. Obviously, we know that BME community are overrepresented in mental health. We need to find out why. We try to link into Lewisham Council, because Lewisham Council and Birmingham City Council are doing a review on the overrepresentation of the BAME community in mental health, sectioning, formal and informal thing is. We wanted to feed into that, but we're not sure whether we can do that, because we thought Lewisham has got similar demographics to Southwark. So that might be a piece of work that we will outline in the mental health report that can be taken on in the next Health Scrutiny Commission round. That's a quick update so far. I'm happy to take any questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Are there any questions, or haven't had any indication? That was very comprehensive. Thank you, Victoria. Can I move on to Peter, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so similarly to other speakers, things have moved on a bit since the report was written, but it's still very much indicative. In particular, we had a scheduled meeting to finalise our reports, but I was isolated at the time, so I was a bit ahead of lockdown, but I was isolated at the time, so that meeting had to be deferred. But in terms of where we're at, since the last update I gave on the will remember that my commission is focusing on 2 main reports, one on exclusions, which is looking at trends within Southwark, what's happening there, and then the second on procurement, looking at how accessible it is and how well we're factoring in social value considerations. On the exclusion side, we've identified a range of issues of concern around the doubling of exclusions in recent years, the fact that it's that kind of 2 schools in particular, or 2 academy chains, are driving a lot of the exclusions. But so we've identified that as a concern. Some issues around councils' data practices, in particular how we're only getting data for around kind of 75% of the children who are leaving schools. And we have a range of recommendations which are directed towards addressing some of the issues we identified. And quite helpfully, since my last update, we visited a Southwark pupil referral unit. We attended a head teachers conference, and we've got broad, at least initial commitment, reflecting across schools as well as the council, about a commitment towards a commitment to move towards 0 exclusions in the borough. I think there's a way to go on that, and definitely there are a whole range of complicating challenges that will be brought about through COVID, but we have practical steps in terms of how the council can improve its tracking of exclusions and off-rolling behaviour at present, and a path it might move down to create a shared commitment with schools to reduce exclusions further, and to port best practice from some of the schools that we spoke to, where they're managing to do little to no exclusions and really going a bit further to keep students in. And we also looked at alternative provision in Southwark, and have some I think quite strong recommendations for the council about how they can look to improve outcomes for pupils attending alternative provision. On the procurement side, you'll see the details in the note about the kind of additional people that we spoke to, but we've got quite clear recommendations about the data that the council should be collecting but isn't, good practice from elsewhere, ranging from places like Preston, where people will be familiar with the kind of model they have there for community wealth building, but also other places like South Tyneside, where they've had great success in encouraging local procurement and using social value legislation quite effectively. So we've identified a number of recommendations that the council can pick up in that area as well, because the entire commission was really eager that we had actionable recommendations and that we could at least begin to outline some targets. So we have a draft report which is going to the commission next week, which includes some like provisional targets that we think are realistic for the council based on us having looked elsewhere. So our intention is to sign off that report next week, and I think kind of future work of the commission can very much focus on education and business specific issues related to our COVID response.
Great. That sounds very interesting work, Peter. Thank you. Are there any questions? I haven't had any. If not, we'll move on to Leanne. Leanne, please.
Okay, great. So I've already mentioned quite a lot of what we did during the meeting earlier. So we've talked to a lot of groups across the borough. And in terms of where we're at, so at the moment, we've already reproduced our first report, which I said fed into the climate change roadmap. So I'm writing up the air quality and the climate change roadmap at the moment. So in terms of air quality, some of the kind of main highlights, recommendations will be around low traffic neighbourhoods, more investment in public transport, a borough-wide greening programme, setting targets on how many parking spaces we want to reduce, looking at electric vehicles, and also air quality and public health. So those are some of the main topics we're going to cover in that report. And then in terms of the climate roadmap, we're thinking that restoration has to be at the heart of everything we do, and we're looking at investigating more into community energy, social justice, and also setting specific targets on driving down car usage. And overall, we think we need kind of a vision of what we want Southwark to look like in 10 years time. So that's again one of the recommendations. So that's it really.
Great.
Is there anything else you want me to cover?
The world's your oyster, as they say. But
yeah, I mean, in terms of learning, we've heard from various cabinet members from across London. We had a field trip to Waltham Forest to look at their brilliant low traffic neighbourhood, and that was quite inspiring. So we got some ideas from there. Yeah, and at the moment, I'm also looking at climate related evidence that's coming out of the pandemic. So this is a really key time to include that evidence. So we know that pollution levels have gone down. So I'm looking at, evidence from monitoring stations, and also anecdotal evidence from residents that, the air is cleaner, wildlife thriving. So we are looking at incorporating that into the recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for giving the updates. That's very useful. If we can move on now to item 8, please, the work programme. Basically, this is just a report for you to note on what we've done over the last 12 months. And we need to consider new items. I mean, the discussions we've had this evening, I guess, have bordered on that to a certain extent. But what I thought is, rather than deciding now, we're due another meeting anyway coming up next month. So if we want to sort of go away and think about areas that we would like OSC, and I mean OSC, not the commissions, but OSC itself, to cover over the next 12 months, then please come either submit them beforehand or come to that meeting with your proposed work areas. That'd be extremely useful. Is that clear? Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Yep. Good.
Yeah.
Silence is consent, as they say. Good. Okay, well, you'd be glad to know that we've beaten our record that was established last week. So we will be getting into the Guinness Book of Records for the longest viable meeting in local government. Perhaps next time we could probably go for a hat trick. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you all again for participating this evening, and a particular thanks to all the outside bodies and co-op members that were also involved. And
sorry, Chair, I'm really sorry. I know you can't stand me. Can I just make the point about timing? Is that a 5 o'clock start is really tough for anyone who's got kids. So I just would like to make that point for your information for future. But thank you otherwise.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good point, and I'm quite open to the people's not the moment, but people's ideas, because if we hadn't have started at 5 o'clock and we started at 6 o'clock, and obviously we'd still be here at 10 o'clock at night. And as much as I used to do that in the old days, I know it's even more demanding nowadays for people. So as we're all supposed to be, not all of us, but as some of us have got time earlier in the day, I don't know whether an earlier time is more preferable rather than a later time. I don't know, but I'm not asking for suggestions now. But by all means, please email me your thoughts on the subject. That'd be appreciated. Okay, everybody, all right? We can depart in peace, I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye now.
Bye.
Good night.
Everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Don't
Night.
forget Richard Livingston's karaoke actions.
That's not happening.
All in favour of Richard